Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them.
Poltergeists. Now, normally I do a specific event or a house or an area or whatever that's can be classified as haunted. This is a bit different. I'm going to do something on poltergeists by themselves. For those of you who don't know what a poltergeist is, the name poltergeist is a German word. It means noisy ghost. And these restless spirits have plagued mankind for time immemorial. Everybody remembers the classic movie Poltergeist. It's one of the best scary movies of all time. The namesake of that movie has been a staple of the paranormal world far longer than the word paranormal has existed. Nobody knows when the first such spirit was encountered, but we know it was well before the 1650s. Famous, or rather infamous, poltergeist cases include the Glen Luce, L-U-C-E, the Glen Luce Devil from 1654, the Drummer of Tedworth from 1662, the Epworth Rectory from 1716, the Stockwell Ghost from 1772, the Bell Witch from 1817, Angelique Cotton from 1846, the Great Amherst Mystery from 1878, and then get it into more modern times, the Borley Rectory from 1937, Rosenheim from 1967, Amityville from 1975, although I rather think that one was more demonic, Enfield from 1977, and Tina Resch from 1984. And there's many, many more. That's just a sampling for you to look up and get an idea of what the thing is. Poltergeists infamously throw stuff around, stack furniture, and levitate people. They sometimes manifest themselves as fearsome entities. Many skeptics try and explain the occurrences away as psychokinetic energy manifested due to a variety of reasons like marital strife or puberty, that kind of thing. We all go through puberty. Not all of us throw stuff around telekinetically. I'm just saying. Such mental hardships can explain some of the occurrences, but by no means can it explain all of it. Furthermore, given the sheer number of poltergeists reported, it would mean that a great portion of the human race is gifted with such psychokinetic abilities, much more so than any researcher has ever postulated. Also, the reports of portals in and around the places where poltergeists have been experienced lends credence to them being otherworldly. I've done a video on portals. Go and check it out. There's a lot of people who think that the portal thing is hogwash, and it's very possible. I'm not saying it's not, but I've seen some things and I've heard things. If it's faked, it's a hell of a fake. If it's a hoax, it's a well-worn hoax because it's been around for centuries. The whole portal situation, when you have Native Americans, the natives of Australia in the outback, and you have ancient Egyptians, and you have ancient Chinese people, all talking about portals to other worlds. There's something to it. That's all I'm saying. I don't know what, but there's something to it. And I still can't get past my friend's mom telling me that story about the... Go check out the movie, or the video that I did on portals. My friend's mom told me that story about that witch in the house opening a portal that never got closed. That sticks with me. It sticks with me. That's all I'm saying. Many modern cases of poltergeists have been investigated by professional paranormal investigators such as Ed and Lorraine Warren. Such investigation teams tend to blend the efforts of psychic mediums and priests with high-tech specialists. The idea is that they want to quantify such claims as the psychic and priests may make with evidence gathered with cameras, recording equipment, sensors, and all kinds of stuff. the equipment that we have now is much better than they had, obviously, back in the 1800s. That's all, that's the idea. There's a very famous case, the Doris Bither case from 1974 was one of the cases where photographic and sound recordings were made of a real otherworldly entity which was terrorizing this poor woman. This case was the basis for the movie The Entity. So we know for a fact these things are real. Ghosts and like that, extra-dimensional deity, extra-dimensional entities are real. They're not deities, they're entities of some kind. Many people tend to think that the vast majority of poltergeist reports are hoaxes. And to be sure, a fair amount of such reports are fakes. People trying to get attention for whatever reason, their 15 minutes of fame, as it were. But when you have witnesses of such caliber as police officers, medical professionals, college professors, military personnel, and the like, it's very difficult to discount all of them. People see things. People report things. Some of these people that I mentioned, the professionals, such high caliber witnesses like police officers and like that, reporting this kind of thing could be bad for their careers. They're not doing their careers any favors by reporting this stuff. So if they're putting it in official police reports, yeah, you got to give some credibility to it. That's all I'm saying. In my opinion, this is my opinion, spirits with grudges or unfinished business trying to get the attention of the living makes sense. After all, is this life in these fragile meat suits all there is? If not, what else can there be? Is there a heaven and or hell? If there is an afterlife, how many restless spirits get lost along the way? As a Christian, I know what I believe. I think it's definitely worth contemplation. So, if somebody comes to you and says, "I think my house is haunted," suggest that they see some professionals, contact some professional paranormal investigators, because if it's real, then they'll know. If it's fake, they'll know. If it's a simple misunderstanding, electrical problems in the house, rodents in the attic, whatever, they'll know. They'll be able to figure it out. But it's better for the people who are undergoing this and experiencing this phenomena. It's better for them to know, because if it is real, ignoring it's not going to make it go away. And if we can help somebody, we need to do that.
About the Grand Canyon, I had no idea this place was such a hotbed for paranormal activity. The Grand Canyon in Arizona is one of the most famous national landmarks in America. It was formed 5 to 6 million years ago. It's a mile deep and up to 18 miles wide. It is over 270 miles long. It became a U.S. national park in 1919. This area has been continuously occupied by human beings since the Ice Age. It's home to multiple First American peoples, the Native Americans, First Americans, whatever nomenclature you want to use. With all that history, there's bound to be ghosts here. There can't not be ghosts here. Reports of paranormal, odd, tragic, or just plain weird happenings permeate the history of this place. I'm going to list a few of them here. Ghosts. There's a ghost of a wandering woman in a white robe and scarf. She's seen frequently walking along the rim and the North Kaibab Trail. Legend says she committed suicide in her cabin after her husband and son were killed in a hiking accident. She's still looking for them. Then there's the missing newlyweds, Glenn and Bessie Hyde. They vanished on their honeymoon trip in 1928. Bessie wanted to be the first woman to ride up the river in the canyon. Their boat was found upright, completely intact, completely stocked. People have seen them walking together on the river's edge. Sometimes they're holding hands, sometimes they're not. There's caverns there where they have found skeletons and things like that. the manager of the caverns, and as I understand it, of the El Tovar Hotel. His name was Gary Ringsby. He hung himself in the 70s, and he's been seen manning the elevators in the caverns and the night desk at the hotel. People have seen him there. The El Tovar Hotel itself has other ghosts as well. The Phantom on the Stairs. And a lot of these people, nobody knows who they were. There was a guest named Fred Harvey who died there. He's been seen there. So there's a well-dressed gentleman on the third floor who greets people, and nobody knows who he is, and he's a ghost. There's an old man with a gray beard that's been seen many times. Pearl, her name was Pearl, P-I-R-L, Pearl A. Ward. She was a hostess and a cowboy. Her grave apparently is there. On June 30th, 1956, there was a mid-air collision over what they now call Crash Canyon. TWA flight, it's part of the Grand Canyon. TWA Flight 2 and United Airlines Flight 718, both out of Los Angeles, were flying in heavy cloud cover, could not see each other until it was too late. They could not avoid the collision. All personnel on board were killed. Their ghosts, the crew and the passengers, their ghosts have been seen wandering the canyon floor. Two other places, Maricopa Point and Phantom Ranch, apparently have had many reports of their workers remaining long after their deaths. And that's just some of the ghosts. There's plenty more. Holy crap, there's plenty more. There's ghosts of Indians running around down there too. I mean, all kinds of stuff. There have been monster sightings around the Grand Canyon. The Mogollon Monster, evidently Bigfoot's meaner, bigger cousin, roams the Ponderosa Pines. He's between 10 to 15 feet tall and covered in long gray-white hair. His weapon of choice is a massive club. His first reported sighting is from 1903. There's another monster apparently running around there who just looks like a big person with heavy, thick boils and stuff all over him. They call him he looks kind of like a troll or an ogre. People have seen him drinking out of the river. It's crazy. UFOs are frequently seen over the canyon floor. A military scientific team reportedly found a 4,000-year-old UFO crash site. The debris was hauled off by the military, but stories of the particulars include so many variations that you almost want to ask if there were multiple crashes. There are reports of out-of-place artifacts. An archaeologist reported finding a cave with Egyptian columns and ancient Egyptian artifacts. The U.S. military has closed the cave off, and the artifacts were transported to the Smithsonian Institute, who now denies that they have them. At least that's the story. So evidently the Grand Canyon is more than just a beautiful natural landmark, more than just a hole in the ground. It is a weird wonderland and well worth a visit. If you get a chance, if you've never been to the Grand Canyon, you got to go. If you don't see anything out of the ordinary, it's still worth the visit because it's absolutely beautiful there. I had a friend who used to work there in a hotel. He used to tell me all kinds of stories about it.
The Giza Pyramids of Egypt. Everyone is familiar with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. It's they're one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. As tourist attractions, these structures see tons of visitors every year, and a lot of people, they're magnificent to look at, but people don't really realize what went into building them. The thing I see that I'm bringing to light here is a lot of tourists, a lot of the locals see and hear things around the pyramids that just can't be explained. And I'm not saying that we can see videos of apparitions or whatever, but there's just a lot of weird stuff that happens around there. So let's get started. There's still controversy as to when these pyramids were built. The most conservative estimates put them at about 5,000 years old, which means they were there at least 3,000 years before Christ walked the earth. There has been widespread speculation as to who actually built the pyramids and how and why. And I'm not going to go into the different theories of their construction. For the purposes of this video, I'm concentrating on the length of time the structures have been around. But we do need to touch on how they were built. If mankind built the pyramids, which is the most likely scenario, with the technology of the time, then we know several truths. These are absolute facts. Massive amounts of slave labor had to be employed. If they weren't slaves, these people were dedicated people. Holy crap, they were religious zealots or something. The best explanation I can see at this point was slave labor, because we know slavery was big in the area. The diet of said slaves was not ideal. Working conditions were horrifically harsh. Water had to be carted to the site. The builders did not have the wheel or even iron. The pyramid builders cut granite and limestone blocks totaling billions of tons using copper tools. Some of the blocks weigh 50 tons or more. And all of these were moved by hand. All of this exceedingly difficult labor and poor diet means that untold thousands of these slaves died in the process. Since the Giza pyramids took longer than a quarter century to build, the sheer number of slaves lost would be multiplied over this long time. Furthermore, Egypt has been a land at war forever. Remember, the Roman Empire was born and died after the pyramids were built. How many battles, massacres, and executions took place within sight of these landmarks? All we know of are the historical records, which are woefully lacking. What this boils down to is that the Giza pyramids may very well be the most haunted structures on Earth. How many slaves, warriors, soldiers, thieves, commoners, kings, pharaohs, concubines, people still walk the sands of Giza, of the Giza Plateau, possibly unaware they've even passed? I'm waiting on a serious investigation of the area to determine an answer to that question. People at the site have seen and heard things, ghostly voices out of nowhere. Animals have led people to archaeological discoveries. The grave sites have been found in the area. If there is a such thing as ghosts, and if ghosts actually do in fact exist and haunt our world, the Giza Plateau, the Giza Pyramids would be the place for them to be. It's been around for 5,000 years with untold millions of deaths in the area. Why would there not be ghosts there? How could there not be? That's my contention. People have seen and heard things, and given the history, how could they not? Edinburgh Vaults. Edinburgh, Scotland is the city. The Edinburgh Vaults are also called the South Bridge Underground Vaults. The next time you find yourself in Edinburgh, Scotland, the tour would not be a waste of time. It's a historic landmark. It's a tourist attraction, even without the hauntings. The vaults are a vast man-made catacombs where the working class once worked and lived. Over time, rain seeped into the caverns, spreading diseases like cholera and consumption. Decades of brothels, alcohol trafficking, and murders have culminated in a truly haunted place. If there was a place for ghosts to congregate, this is it. Okay, it's like the Paris, the catacombs under Paris, that kind of thing. This is basically the same concept. 40,000 years of geological activity and glacial movement have created a natural defensive position, a huge rock with 3 steep cliffs and a long sloping hill to the top. Local people have used this as a defensive outpost for almost 3,000 years. A fortress was built sometime between 1058 and 1093, Big Stone Fortress. Bridges were built to connect the high points of the old town of Edinburgh, because it's a very hilly region. The longest of the two, the South Bridge, had 19 arches supporting the road over the Cowgate Ravine. Tenement buildings were constructed on either side of the bridges, enclosing the arches and forming the Edinburgh vaults. By the mid-1800s, the vaults were being used as workshops. When the rains caused the diseases to spread, illness and death, the city council moved all the legal residents out. This meant that the caverns became a haven for the poor, the underbelly of Edinburgh. During the Irish potato famine of 1845 to 1847, destitute Irish settled into the vaults. Prostitution, whiskey distilling, gambling, fighting, and murders were all commonplace. By the early 20th century, the vaults were sealed off. Excuse me. In the 1980s, the vaults were rediscovered. They started doing tours down there. When the vaults were open to tourism, it wasn't long before strange things began to occur. Now we get into the haunted stuff. That was a quick history. Now comes the hauntings. Multiple mediums located and identified the exact same ghost, and there's a hell of a lot more than one. There's more than a dozen. People feel uncomfortable in these places. They hear all manner of strange things, like footsteps, moans, disembodied voices, even bloodthirsty shrieks. Children's laughter is also prevalent throughout the vaults. Multiple ghosts have been reported, and not all of them human. Many birds have been seen, and they're not normal birds. They're ghostly apparitions. Also, the ghost of a shaggy dog has been known to plop itself down at a visitor's feet. Animal ghosts. Jack is the ghost of a little boy in 18th century garb. Many other ghost children have been reported as well, but Jack is the one that's most prevalent. However, the most notorious presence in the vaults is a dark figure in knee-high boots, rough trousers, and the trousers are stuffed into the boots, and he wears dirty, ruffled white shirts. He's a dirty, ruffled white shirt. He's called Mr. Boots because of those boots. Mr. Boots is unkempt and unshaven and has very bad breath. People have smelled it. He seems to feed off of the energy of groups, like the tour groups that go through the vaults. Mr. Boots does not like groups being there. Sometimes he douses all of the lights and candles, leaving everyone in total darkness. Mr. Boots occupies one specific room. He shares it with the ghost of a girl that is said the ghost of the girl that he murdered. Tour guides always warn groups about Mr. Boots just to be on the safe side. If you're going to go into an area like that, I guess it's better to go with a little bit of forewarning. Tour guides also warn, like I said, tour groups warn groups about Mr. Boots. When Mr. Boots is really angry, he can be heard stomping along the various corridors, and many people have seen him. That's how we know what he looks like. Considering that there's no way to know exactly how many deaths occurred in the vaults, and it's likely that many more than 100 people died there, more than 100 murders occurred there, chances are that Mr. Boots has a hell of a lot of company, and I would love to visit that just for the haunted aspect, but I'm a history buff as well, so, I guess those two go hand in hand. You can't go to a historical spot without a chance of running into a ghost, and since I enjoy the paranormal as well, it kind of goes hand in hand. So, if you get a chance, check out the Edinburgh Vaults. If you get the opportunity to go to Scotland and go to Edinburgh, take a tour. The worst thing that'll happen is Mr. Boots turns the lights out.
Tower of London. Here we go. The White Tower has a long and bloody history and has been the site of many reported ghost sightings. The tower was originally a wooden structure, and stone construction began in 1078. It took decades to build. Successive monarchs added on to the structure over the centuries. This tower has contained royal apartments, a mint for minting coinage, armory,
menagerie, different critters, and a jewel house where the crown jewels are still kept. So it's still active, it's still there, it's got guards, it's a fully functioning edifice, the whole 9 yards. It gained notoriety as a prison for the royal elites, I guess. They didn't send regular prisoners there. If they had a royal who was convicted or accused of something, or they wanted to get him out of the way, they sent him to the Tower of London. Anybody who fell in disfavor usually got sent there. An interesting side note, the very first prisoner that was ever sent there was also the very first prisoner who escaped. They give the royal prisoners a lot of privileges, hosting parties, that kind of thing. This guy brought in a bunch of wine, and while the guards were drinking, he had, in one of the barrels, he had secured a rope, and he climbed out a window, and had some Confederates down there with, this is in England, it wasn't the American Confederates, but it was, they were allies. They had a boat down there. He jumped on a boat and headed to Norway. Yeah. I forgot to write down his name, but brilliant guy. First prisoner to put in there was also the first guy to escape. Imagine that. At any rate, prisoners were regularly tortured and or executed, including 3 queens: Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and Jane Grey. Not Jean Grey from the Marvel X-Men, Jane Grey. 2 princes were also strangled to death. Young boys strangled to death in their sleep. This tower is notorious. It is infamous for this kind of thing. Anybody who thinks the ruling class in England didn't get their hands dirty, you got another thing coming. These guys were as bloodthirsty as any barbarian. They just went about it in a little more organized fashion. That's it. These 2 princes were in line to rule, and the guy who was in charge didn't like that, so guess what? They got strangled in their sleep. The tower is reportedly one of the most haunted places on Earth. People have been seeing ghosts there since forever. Since 1100, I think. Margaret Pole, Countess of Salisbury, can be heard screaming and running around, presumably running from her executioners. This lady was executed in the tower, and people see her and hear her, they hear her screaming and running around. So, Queen Anne Boleyn can be seen walking on the greens with her head under her arm. Yeah. The 2 boy princes that were strangled can be seen playing and holding hands, presumably looking for an escape. All in all, if you want to see a ghost, the Tower of London would probably be a good first stop. If you're going to tour haunted places in the world, you missing the Tower of London would be an atrocity on your part. The Poveglia Island. Poveglia Island is it's a historical island. It's had a really checkered history. It's got a lot of stuff wrong with it, and it's just not a good place. The island sits in the Venetian lagoon between Venice and Lido in northern Italy. It's a very small canal divides the island into 2 parts. An octagonal fort sits on the island. It used to be part of a series of forts. It was originally intended to control the entrances to the lagoon. Most of the others have been, well, I'm not sure what happened to the others, but one of them sits on this island, and it's an old one from the 1700s, I think it was. In 1776, historical date in more ways than one, and the island came under the control of the Public Health Office of France. In 1793, of Italy, In 1793, there were several cases of the plague on 2 ships, so the island was converted into a confinement station for the ill. The island was supposed to be a check-in point for people coming to Italy, and when the plague came in on a couple of ships, they just turned the island into a confinement area for the ill. It's called a lazaretto, is what they called it. This lazaretto was closed in 1814. Another historic date. I don't know why it keeps falling on that. I guess there is such thing as coincidence. I don't know. During this time, 1793 to 1814, it was used as a quarantine station for victims of the plague and other diseases. Essentially, the sick were sent there for 40 days to see if they would die or recover. Many were left there long past the 40 days and died anyway. Thousands of these bodies were burned. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but when you have really bad, serious illnesses and you have no cure for them, sometimes quarantine is the only way to go. We were quarantined for a while with that lockdown here a while back. Nobody liked it. Maybe it was necessary, I don't know. My contention is this. When you know for a fact people are dying, and you know for a fact there's a way to quarantine people who have it so it doesn't spread to the other people, yeah, quarantine, I guess, is the way to go. Now, a lot of those illnesses have cures, or at least treatments, successful treatments. Back then, they didn't have it. Remember, this was 1793 to 1814. It's not like modern medicine existed. In 1922, the existing buildings were converted into a mental asylum. Just gets better and better. The hits just keep on coming. Later, it was used as a nursing home long-term care facility until its closure in 1968. Nobody likes those things, but they serve a function. It is not possible to know exactly how many people died on the island, but the estimates are as high as 2 million. Again, as far as the quarantine thing goes, the quarantining sick people, you can't really blame them. It's harsh, I know, but you can't really blame them. People regularly collected plague victims and bodies and burned them, so that was the standard treatment of the time. As far as the mental asylum, everybody knows how bad mental patients were treated in the 20s and 30s. Putting them on this island just adds to the problems. Centuries of torment, suffering, sickness, insanity, and death have left this island scarred. There's no way this place could be free of hauntings and restless spirits. Visitors have reported hearing footsteps and screams, as well as seeing lights, orbs, and even apparitions. If there was a place that's going to be haunted, this island is it. You got plague, disease victims, not to mention warfare. Warfare. You got the quarantine place. You got the warfare. You got a mental asylum, and then a place where old people were just sent to die. There's going to be spirits at this place. You can't get around it. If hauntings really do exist, Poveglia Island would be a prime location for them. And if you're going to be a ghost hunter or something like that, as I understand it, access to the island is restricted, but if you can get permission to go there, that would be the place to go. Suicide Forest. There are places in the world that are revered as locations of dark dread and ill intent. If there was ever a place that moniker fit, that description fit, it would be the Suicide Forest. I'm going to see if I can pronounce this properly because it's in Japanese, so bear with me. Aokigahara. I'm going to spell it. Aokigahara. Aokigahara Jukai. Jukai. Aokigahara Jukai. It's in the shadow of Japan's Mount Fuji
It is an ancient forest, as haunting as it is beautiful. It's called the Sea of Trees. Its more well-known nickname is the Suicide Forest. Each year, dozens of people walk into these woods with the intent of dying there. The bodies are there. The forest is so vast and so thick that suicide victims can go years without being found. When they are found, many times they are left there like some kind of a macabre display for hikers. You know, somebody ventures off the path and they find one of these things, one of these bodies. And by the way, leaving the pathways is illegal. The paths are monitored by police on remote video cameras. I don't know, maybe they're afraid to go in there too. And there's really no way to tabulate the number of suicides that occur in the forest every year, because nobody reports that kind of stuff. Nobody says, I'm going to go suicide move, and then they go in there. You know? Now, there's other stuff that goes along with this. In the 19th century, this place was popular with those intent on abandoning an elderly relative so they die of starvation, dehydration, or exposure. This was a common practice years ago, centuries ago, called ubasute. U-B-A-S-U-T-E. Ubasute. This was back in the 19th century. So, yeah, old people were sent in there and just left to die. There are signs posted pleading with visitors not to kill themselves and giving phone numbers of the police station where they have people who will talk with them and listen to them, try to convince them not to. Local legends are numerous and are observed by most. Locals won't go into the forest at night. Compasses don't work. Visitors get lost and cannot find their way out, which drives them insane. Ghosts walk through the trees. These ghosts lure others into the woods. That's what the legend is reported. And the people who are lured into the woods get lost and go crazy. There's a lot more to this, but there was just so much information. This place is just ridiculously haunted by all reports. People who enter the woods report feeling as if they're being watched. Many report seeing apparitions, hearing voices calling out to them. And with all the death that this place has seen, I'd be surprised if it wasn't haunted, you know? Now, I'm not pro-suicide in any way, shape, form, or fashion. If you feel the need to self-harm or to kill yourself or whatever, commit suicide, don't do it. Find some help. There's people out there who are willing to listen. Find a priest. Find a preacher, a minister. Find a doctor, a psychologist, a loved one, a family member. There's somebody out there willing to listen, willing to help you. Don't commit suicide. It's not worth it. I'm a firm believer that every person is a library. When a person dies, that library, some libraries are bigger than others because of the age thing. Young people have a smaller library than older people. Older people are like, their library is the size of Manhattan because they've lived so long and they've experienced so much. When any person dies, that library is lost. Imagine losing a library before it even gets started. Young people are committing suicide because of a lot of time because of these COVID lockdowns and things like that. And it's crazy. Don't do it. Find somebody to talk to. Okay? It's just not worth it. Get some help. Okay? Now, that being said, this suicide forest here is just, I've seen pictures of it. The pictures give you goosebumps. There is, I don't know why anybody would go in there, to be honest. There's only, I don't know of a reason to go in there. I really wouldn't. It's a beautiful place to look at. If you're flying over it, that's great, but you couldn't pay me to go in that forest. Not because of the haunting, just because it's creepy. So, an area that is fairly well known but isn't really talked about a lot. I'm talking about the French Quarter in New Orleans. New Orleans, Louisiana, there's a part of that town called the French Quarter. It's also called the Vieux Carré. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Vieuxcarre, and the accent is on that last E. Vieux Carré, I believe it's called. It is the oldest neighborhood in New Orleans. The new neighborhood was founded in 1718 and often is called the crown jewel of New Orleans. It's romantic, it's mysterious, it's got that jazzy feel to it, jazz music kind of feel to it. Old world architecture and bohemian charm all wrapped up into one. Known for its food, some of the restaurants go back for 100 years or more. It's just wonderful. Jackson Square and Bourbon Street are there. It's packed with history. The French Quarter is steeped in a rich history of love, war, piracy, voodoo, outlaws, slavery, lawmen, politics, and revenge. With over 300 years of history, including the War of 1812, pirates, and outlaws, it's no wonder people see ghosts all over the place. And let's not forget the Civil War, too. That was there, too. If ever there were a place where ghosts would congregate, this is literally the place. If you're going to hang out someplace in the afterlife forever, for hundreds of years, you couldn't pick a much better place than the French Quarter. Good food, good people, good atmosphere, good music. You literally can't go wrong. The Andrew Jackson Hotel is one of the highlights here. In the past, it was a boarding school. A fire caused the death of several children. Those kids are still seen and heard playing in the halls. Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. It's a bar over 100 years old, a tavern. It houses the ghost of a pirate who was beheaded for stealing from the great Captain Lafitte himself. The Palace, also known as the Sultan's House, was the site of gruesome murders, including one victim who was evidently buried alive. Guests report shrieks, screams, odd smells, and a plethora of apparitions. Le Laurie Mansion, I believe that's how it's pronounced. Le Laurie, L-A-U-R-I-E, Le Laurie Mansion, was owned by a man who graduated at the bottom of his class from medical school. He owned an inordinate number of slaves, a whole bunch of slaves, more than he needed. And apparently he experimented on them and tortured them. Did medical experiments and tortured him and all kinds of stuff. Townsfolk formed an angry mob to get him, but he and his wife managed to escape. Visitors report evil presences, some of which follow them home. A lot of them see many, many different apparitions. And this is not all. I didn't even touch on the voodoo, the Civil War, the post-war outlaws, all of which add to the tapestry that is the paranormal French Quarter. If you want an interesting place to visit on vacation, consider New Orleans. And if you do visit there, don't you dare miss out on the Vieux Carré. Vieux Carré. Vieuxcarre. I hope I'm saying that right. Vieux Carré. Anyway, the French Quarter there in New Orleans. I drove through there one time. I am sorry to say I did not stop. I should have. It's just got such a fascinating history. I'm a history buff as it is. I love rich history, and that place, even without the ghosts, it has such a great history. The Harrisville haunting. Now, I've always found ghost stories to be riveting, but I take he said, she said stories with kind of a grain of salt. One person or a pair of people can be mistaken or duplicitous. It might even be a hoax, you never know. Either way, a few witnesses can be totally unreliable. That's why this story is so believable. There have been generations of witnesses, both local and out of town, who have seen, heard, and experienced tons of stuff. For the record, the movie The Conjuring was based on this house. The house in question is in Harrisville, Rhode Island. It was built in 1736. The story goes that one of the original residents of the house was Bathsheba Sherman. She was said to have been a witch who was caught sacrificing her child to Satan. She later committed suicide so she could inhabit the house forever. It is said that dozens of spirits inhabit the house, including Bathsheba, as well as more than one demonic entity. Now, the story with The Conjuring starts in 1971. The Perron family bought the house and the 200-acre property. It was the mother, the father, and they had 5 daughters. And from day one, paranormal experiences were the norm. An old man was seen in the house as they were moving in, and nobody knows who he was. One of the kids noticed him, and they thought it was just one of the neighbors or, some relative or whatever. They heard weird noises, footsteps, and whispers were all through the house. They heard all kinds of stuff. Household items seemed to relocate themselves throughout the house. Doors would open and close by themselves. Benevolent entities tucked the children in at night, and these entities were considered quote-unquote babysitters by the children. One ghost, a woman, would kiss the children goodnight on the foreheads. One entity would sweep the kitchen when nobody was around. So, yeah, in that respect, a lot of them may be benevolent. We don't know. All of this seemed harmless, and the family did not feel threatened. One neighbor did give them a warning to keep the lights on at night for the sake of the children. Then the situation became much darker. The children were attacked in the barn by unseen entities. They started hearing whispers about the dead bodies of 7 soldiers buried in the walls. Yeah, so if you start hearing whispers about the dead bodies in the walls, yeah, that would get me. Starting in the early mornings, around 5:15, the smell of rotting flesh would move through the house. You'd just smell it in this place, and then they'd smell it over there, and then you'd smell it over there. Now, rotting flesh, putrid smells are a sign of demonic activity. So, the children were being tortured by a male spirit. A woman in gray, possibly Bathsheba Sherman herself, threatened the mother with death and gloom. Evidently, the spirit felt that she was the mistress of the house and resented the mother as a rival. When the demonic entity possessed the mother, Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in to investigate. If you don't know who Ed and Lorraine Warren are, they are probably some of the most famous paranormal investigators in history. She was a medium, and he was I don't even know what you call him. I guess demonologist would be a word. But there's more to it. It wasn't just a demonologist. He was also watch the movie The Conjuring. You'll see what I'm talking about. The Warrens were one of the most renowned paranormal investigators in the world at the time, so they called them in. The Warrens attempted to help the mother with a seance conducted in the basement, but the seance did not go as planned. The mother was heard speaking tongues in a growling voice. Then she was levitated and then thrown across the room, while she was tied to a chair. The Perron family to this day is still being haunted, even though they no longer live there. It's crazy. The stories of this house are many and varied. Since the Perrons sold the house, the paranormal activity there persists. One owner was attempting to do some remodeling. He ran screaming from the house, literally. He left behind his car, his tools, and his clothes. He bought the house, was going to remodel it, and then he left screaming, left his car, his tools, and his clothes behind. The current owners, still the ones who live there now, still hear whispers and voices and footsteps throughout the house. Now, to be fair, I gotta throw a little, because this is a great story, but I want to throw a little water on the situation. To be fair, researchers have found records that say Bathsheba Sherman was a normal woman who had several children die young, and given that it was the 1800s, this was not uncommon. Be that as it may, that does not explain away all of the other paranormal activity that has been documented in the house. And when I say documented, oh my Lord, documented. There's photos and videos and affidavits, sworn affidavits. Everybody who's been in that house has experienced something. It's probably one of the most haunted places, not only in America, but in the world. So yeah, in that Harrisville farmhouse in Rhode Island, that's just it's freaking creepy. Okay, you couldn't get me to go in there.
This is about the Pirate's House. Located a block from the Savannah River in the most historic section of Savannah, Georgia, this place is a landmark. It's in different. It has had several different buildings over the years, but originally it was built in 1754 by seamen, sailors, in the settlement of Savannah, which was first founded in 1733. They founded Savannah in 1733, and this house was built in 1754. From its beginning, the Pirate's House was a dangerous place, full of pirates, scallywags, and other shady types. This was a favorite spot for grog and rum for seamen from all over the world. Sailors visited from everywhere. This was one of the more famous pubs in the world. The most famous pirate to visit the pub was Jean-Pierre Lafitte, who married a woman from this area, from Savannah, that area. The Pirate House has gone through, as I said, several buildings over the years, but its current incarnation has been there for centuries. In the Pirate's House rum cellar, there was a tunnel connecting the building to the Savannah River. A sailor, either drunk or drugged, could pass out in the pub and wake up the next day on an unfamiliar ship at sea. Being shanghaied wasn't limited to Asian ports or San Francisco. Press gangs were infamous in the area, and if you don't know what a press gang is, they get a group of big tough guys together and they go out looking for quote-unquote volunteers for sea duty. A ship had to have so much crew, or it couldn't operate. And when you couldn't get volunteers, you made volunteers. That's what press gangs were for. So, with over 250 years of history, rife with pirates and other criminals and their activity, it's no wonder ghostly activity is prominent here. Lots of violence happened here, lots of robberies and fights. Sorry, a doggy emergency. Anyway, there was a lot of violence here, a lot of robberies, a lot of fights. As I said, the press gangs were out looking for volunteers, and most of the volunteers, when you were talking about press gang, most of the volunteers they didn't go willingly. We'll just put it like that. So there was lots of fighting going on. There's a lot of ghostly activity happens in this place. A guest was holding a drink glass, which was suddenly and inexplicably filled with Spanish moss. A young couple asked if the ghosts were real, and in response, a stack of drink glasses in a pyramid formation exploded right in front of them. And we're not talking where they fell down. We're talking they exploded with shards of glass going everywhere. People hear odd noises, footsteps banging on the walls and doors, disembodied voices, all kinds of stuff like that. Very, very prevalent there. The owner and another man were spending the night, and the other man was a prominent skeptic. This guy did not believe in ghosts. He thought it was all hogwash. Well-known skeptic. This man and the owner both witnessed a full shot glass of rum disappear right in front of them. As in, it's there, and then suddenly it just fades away and disappears. Right in front of them. Multiple witnesses at different times have seen a big burly man in period clothes, like a sailor, sitting at a table. These witnesses span multiple generations, because many people come to this pub, and my great-grandmother saw this, my grandmother saw this, my mother saw this, I know I've seen it. That kind of thing. This big burly man has been seen by many people over multiple generations sitting at a table. When this man looks at the witness, whoever the witness is, that witness is invariably suddenly fear-stricken. That has been reported every single time that he looked. They'll say, people have said, "Well, I saw him, but he didn't look at me." Whenever they see him and he looks at them, suddenly they're just racked with fear for whatever reason. This guy induces fear in people. Computers have gone haywire and crashed, and on one occasion spewed, quote, hate and, quote, die. Those two words, hate and die. Whatever's in there is not happy. That's all I'm saying. It's not a happy person that was there. The most prevalent and long-running ghost seen in the building is that of the pirate Flint. Flint, evidently, died in one of the rooms as he yelled for more rum. His cries for rum have been heard by many. As the story goes, if you buy him a rum, your stay will be much more amicable. He'll be a little nicer to you. Now, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the book Treasure Island. It's a classic. If you've not read it, you need to. There's movies put out about it, and they're good, but you cannot surpass reading the original book. The book is excellent. Robert Louis Stevenson based the characters in that book on real-life people. Evidently, Flint was one of them. If you ever find yourself in Savannah, Georgia, and have some time to kill, don't pass up the opportunity to visit the Pirate's House. You will not regret it. The lore, the history, the fun, and in some cases the terror is palpable.
The Rose Hall Plantation. The Rose Hall Plantation in Montego Bay, Jamaica, was built and or established in 1770. Now, the plantation itself was owned by John Palmer, and this was... It's got a storied past. But I'm going to go back into the history of this place for a little bit, and please bear with me, and you'll understand why it's one of the most haunted places on the planet. Annie Mae Patterson was born in 1802 to an Irish father and an English mother. The Patterson family moved to Haiti when Annie was very, very young. She learned voodoo there from her Haitian nanny. Annie's parents died when she was 10 under very mysterious circumstances. She was raised by the nanny until the woman died 8 years later. Annie intended to marry wealth, so she moved to Jamaica. She quickly gained the attention of the English plantation owner named John Palmer, the guy who owned the Rose Hall Plantation. They married, and Annie became the mistress of the plantation. Quickly becoming bored with Palmer, she began taking lovers, using slaves in that capacity. When she grew tired of her lover, whichever slave or whatever it was, or if she thought that Palmer was becoming suspicious, the slave lover would be murdered. Sometimes by herself. Sometimes she got other people to do it. But this was a fairly common occurrence by all accounts. After 6 years of marriage, she poisoned Palmer and inherited his money. I think there's a law about you have to be married for so long before you inherit the money, and she waited 6 years and then she poisoned the guy and got his money. The slaves began referring to Annie as the White Witch. Annie married and murdered 2 more husbands, taking their wealth as well. Annie also enjoyed watching slaves getting flogged or beaten for her amusement. She had a streak of sadism. Each time a husband died, their room was closed off forever. Annie even had 2 pits in the house, at least on the property. She used them as her dungeon. Whenever slaves would run away, she would take them and throw them. When they caught them, they would take them and throw them into the pit and let them starve to death with no water. She used it as a deterrent for slaves escaping. And whenever she would have somebody murdered, she would send groups of slaves to bury bodies, and then send another group of slaves to murder those slaves, so that there was no trace of where the bodies were buried. She was just about as sadistic and evil as they come. What all of this boils down to is that Rose Hall is the entire the great house in the entire plantation is one of the most haunted places in Jamaica. Tourists and staff alike have reported dozens of apparitions, slamming doors, ghostly screams, disembodied voices, cold spots, you name it, it's there. They've experienced it. A maid, at one point, early 1900s, a maid was thrown from a balcony to her death by unseen forces. People watched it happen, but they have no idea why it happened. Now, when I was doing research, I found a book. My wife got it for me for Christmas. My wife or my son one. By a man named Jeff Bellinger. Belanger. It's called The World's Most Haunted Places. Really great book. I found a lot of good material in here. I'm going to read an excerpt from here, or at least parts of it. I'm starting on page 52. By the way, you need to get the book. It's really good. The World's Most Haunted Places by Jeff Bellinger. I hope I'm saying his name right. Starting on page 52. In December of 1831, a dashing young gentleman named Robert Rutherford from England came to Rose Hall Plantation to fill the position of bookkeeper. Annie took an interest in the gentleman instantly, as did her housekeeper, Millicent. This is where the story of Rose Hall turns into a murderous soap opera that would play itself out in only a few weeks. Millicent's grandfather, Taku, was a powerful voodoo witch and also an occasional lover of Annie Palmer. Robert Rutherford, far from the strict society of England, fancied both Millicent and his new employer, Annie Palmer. This infuriated Annie, who wanted Rutherford's attentions for herself. The White Witch of Rose Hall cast a spell on Millicent, causing her to die within 9 days. Taku was infuriated. He stormed into the mansion and strangled Annie Palmer to death in her bed in 1831. So that's how she died. Annie was entombed in an above-ground cement coffin that still sits in the east garden of the house. Some of her religious-minded former slaves tried to cast spells on her grave to keep her spirit locked up, but their magic didn't work. Annie wouldn't be stopped by death. And it goes on. I put that in there. I read that excerpt because this tells you the level of depravity and evil that this white witch, Annie, was capable of. And it tells the level of violence that was on that plantation. The White Witch, and now keep in mind, there's no way of knowing how many people were murdered there, okay? Because she didn't keep records and everything was hidden. The White Witch has become something of a boogeyman for Jamaican children, and I can certainly see why. That would not be somebody I would want to run into on a dark and stormy night. Now, if you have a chance to go visit the Rose Hall Plantation, that would be a scary place. I don't know that I could make that trip. I don't know that I could walk onto that property. Just knowing what all happened there, that's just ridiculous. But, as I said, it's one of the most haunted places in Jamaica, probably most haunted places in the world. So, if you get a chance, and if you've got the steely guts and the heart of stone to go there and check that out, hey, knock yourself out. Place that I don't think can be without restless spirits. I'm talking about the catacombs of Paris. And if you're not familiar, a little bit of background. In Paris, France, in the rainy season, they have a lot of flooding. Paris has been around for a long, long time. They had a number of cemeteries. Flooding, this is going to sound bad, tended to bring coffins up. They had a problem with coffins and dead bodies being strewn because of flooding, being strewn across roadways and in people's yards and things like that. And this is, they had to find a place to put them. They had a number of mines underneath Paris, old mine shafts and things like that. And they expanded them and turned them into catacombs, and this was a
prime place for them to put these bodies. They weren't trying to be disrespectful, but you had a lot of disease at the time, and the idea was, let's get these things underground as quick as we can and contain the disease as best we can. They weren't trying to be disrespectful. They were trying to act in the public's best interest. So here we go. In Paris, France, one of the most exciting and beautiful cities in Europe, there's a place where the dead evidently do not rest. Did I say in? I meant under. Under Paris lies a series of catacombs, caves and tunnels, mine shafts, where the citizens of Paris took their dead for decades. These tunnels started out as a series of mines, but were converted to tombs to hold the dead. Flooding caused the bodies of nearby cemeteries to spill out onto the streets and grounds of neighboring properties, so the authorities decided to start moving the dead into these tunnels. The transfer of bodies took from 1774 to 1800 or even later. The catacombs hold more than 6 million bodies. There are 7 levels of tunnels in this complex. In 1871, French revolutionaries, called communards, massacred a group of nobles in one of these underground tunnels. During World War II, the French resistance used the tunnel system extensively to liberate Paris. The Nazis also established an underground bunker in these catacombs. Fighting in the tunnels was fierce. So it's not just the dead that were buried there. We have warfare being conducted there as well. We have revolutionary battles, not from the American Revolution, but from French revolutionaries, communards, communists, Nazis, fascists, whatever you want to call them. Visitors to the catacombs have reported hearing haunting cries of "Vive la Commune," and gunfire can be heard echoing in other areas. So apparently the spirits down there are restless, and they're still trying to do whatever they were doing before. They don't know they're dead. Clearly the dead who were packed into the catacombs, and the others who actually died there are not inclined to be silent. In a tomb where over 6 million share their final resting place, it's no wonder that many people report ghostly activity. Today, the catacombs are maintained as a museum. I understand the historic significance, and I understand you want a tourist attraction. But at some point, just let them rest. Holy crap. There's more to this than even that. There are people who, I don't know, they have maybe a macabre sense of humor. I don't know what to call them. In 2004, police discovered a fully equipped and functioning movie theater in an area of the catacombs. It was equipped with a giant cinema screen, seats for the audience, projection equipment, film reels of recent thrillers and film noir classics, a fully stocked bar, and a complete restaurant with tables and chairs. I don't know who the hell would go down there and watch a movie or have dinner. That's just freaking bizarre. I'm just reporting what they found. There's a group that took responsibility for all of that, and I don't know what their reasoning is, and frankly, I don't care. It's macabre. Seems the catacombs are not meant to slip quietly into history. The dead that are there, I'm sure, would rather just rest in peace. The people who died there would probably want to be left alone. I have no idea why people are doing that kind of crap down there. It's one thing to have a museum and people respectfully go through and observe. This is what happened. This is history. But building a movie theater and a restaurant down there, to me, no.
Historic haunting video of the White House. The history of the home of the President of the United States is well documented. From its initial construction and completion in 1800 to its burning by the British in 1814, through its rebuilding and subsequent use since then, the White House has seen the history of our nation with a front row seat. So rather than rather than rehash the history of the building, I thought I might just list the different paranormal activity which people have reported there. Here we go. William Wallace Lincoln, a 12-year-old son of Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln, died of a typhoid-like illness in 1862. His spirit was the first one to be encountered, at least the first one that we know of, that somebody actually recorded. Not recorded as in, oh, look, we got a video of it. But as in, put down, oh, look, we saw this spirit. You know, his was the first one, William Wallace Lincoln. Edward Lincoln, 3-year-old son of Abraham Lincoln, has been reported many times. Apparently he died pretty close to there as well. I don't know if it was actually in the White House, but, you know. Alec, the Lincoln's brother, has also been reported multiple times. Now, again, I don't know if this guy died in the White House or not, but he's been reported there. I'm going to drink coffee. A young boy has been reportedly seen and felt on many occasions by staff and visitors. They don't know who the kid is, but he's there. He may actually predate the White House because of his attire. So it's possible he was playing in the area and something bad happened and nobody knew about it. And then they built the White House over it. We don't know. The ghostly or semi-transparent apparition of a woman in white has been seen along the top railing there above the stairwell. We don't know who it was, but she's been seen there many times. Okay, this is kind of a funny one. Somebody, and I don't recall who, ordered workmen to take out the rose garden in the back of the White House there. When the workmen showed up with their tools, their shovels, and what all to get rid of these roses, Dolly Madison is said to have shown up and protected her rose garden, because she's the one who put it there, from these workmen. She said to protect her rose garden from those who would remove it. And guess what? The rose garden is still there. So Dolly Madison is probably still there protecting her roses. Abraham Lincoln himself is said to visit certain dignitaries from time to time. There was a dignitary, I want to say he was from Africa, and there was a knock at his door at night. He went and opened the door, and Abraham Lincoln was there. So Abe is still making the rounds, apparently. The ghost of a British soldier, apparently lost and confused still in the War of 1812, apparently roams the halls. The War of 1812 was horrendous. That's where in 1814, they burned the White House down, the British did. It was like part 2 of the Revolutionary War. And apparently there's a British soldier still trying to figure out what he's supposed to do. So, staff and guests have reported lights turning on and off by themselves. They hear footsteps. They've heard a crying woman. Voices in unoccupied rooms. They also report feeling cold chills and being touched and pulled. Oddly enough, whenever anyone has reported being touched or pulled, it's never a malicious experience. It's always gentle and friendly, and somebody, pulling them this way to get them out of the hallway or whatever. It's not like somebody. The spirits aren't trying to hurt anyone. Well, unless you mess with Dolly Madison's roses, apparently. She got apparently quite irate. The occupants of the White House have seen our nation through some of the bloodiest periods in American history. That kind of experience is sure to leave emotional imprints on not only the people, but the location. And as I understand it, that's a big part of hauntings in general. Abraham Lincoln reportedly felt personally responsible for every death in the Civil War. Imagine going through eternity with that guilt on your conscience. Stone's Public House. Stone's Public House in Ashland, Massachusetts was built in 1832. It is still active as a restaurant and tavern. It's no longer a hotel, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have its share of overnight guests, if you know what I mean. Captain John Stone heard that there was a railroad line to be built through Ashland. So he built the inn near the rail station. You know, location, location, location. Smart guy. It was originally called the Railroad Boarding House. John Stone ran the inn himself for only a few years. He sold it to his brother Napoleon. Many famous people, including Daniel Webster, stayed at the inn. I believe he made a speech there, some sort of an address. The establishment has had many owners over the years, mostly retaining the original owner's name on the billboard in various forms. The first person credited with exploring the ghosts in the inn was Leonard Cappy Fournier, who purchased the inn in 1976. A renowned psychic named Ralph Bibbo, B-I-B-B-O, has stated that there are several ghosts who haunt the inn. According to Bibbo, around 1848, John Stone killed a traveling salesman named Michael when the salesman was accused of cheating at a poker game. As I understand it, Stone intended to knock him out with his pistol, but he ended up hitting him too hard and killed him. The body was allegedly buried in the basement, although it has never been found. And people have tried to dig up the basement to look, but nobody's found the body. So, on June 11th, 1862, 10-year-old Mary Jane Smith was struck by a rail car and brought to the inn where she died. There's also a curse attached to the girl's bloody dress. I'll get to that here in a minute. Behind the bar is a very intriguing photograph of a band performing in the pub. In the grain and texture of one of the wooden support beams is a very clear image of a man with a big black mustache and dressed in old-fashioned clothes. This is believed to be John Stone. In the basement, workers found a hidden room that was evidently a stop in the Underground Railroad. You know, they were smuggling escaped slaves out of the Old South. It ran apparently from 1830 to 1860. The workers found a water barrel, a cot, and some old blankets in the room. So apparently it had been used, you know. Now, over the years, employees and guests have reported apparitions, disembodied voices, both old and young disembodied voices. People being tapped on the shoulder, being touched, footsteps, banging noises, furniture moving by itself, and of course the smell of pipe smoke. Now on the third floor, up in the attic, Mary Jane Smith's bloody dress is there, and when it's been moved, the ghostly experiences follow it wherever it goes. People have gotten downright creeped out and scared and brought the dress back. A manager from decades ago evidently still haunts the place. Runaway slaves who never made it to freedom still inhabit the inn, evidently. John Stone has been seen sitting at the bar more than once. Michael, the salesman, is evidently still hanging around as well. Mary Jane Smith evidently watches over her dress on the third in the third floor up there in the attic. An old woman has been seen sitting at a table waiting, like she's waiting for someone. A little girl has been seen in a second floor window. She's apparently a different spirit than Mary Jane Smith. She seems in distress. And there's many, many more. You would be, as a matter of fact, you would be hard-pressed to find an employee, current or former, who doesn't have some kind of ghost story about working there. Stone's Public House is credited as one of the most haunted and spiritually active places in America. If you are ever in Ashland, Massachusetts, stop in for a drink. You never know what or who you're going to see. Alcatraz Prison. Before we get into this, it's that time of year my allergies are kicking my butt, so just, bear with me. I'm sorry if I make disgusting noises, please forgive me. All right. Alcatraz Prison sits on Alcatraz Island in San Francisco Bay. It was first discovered in 1775 by Spanish explorer Juan Miguel de Ayala, A-Y-A-L-A, Ayala. He named the island La Isla de los Alcatrazes, the Island of Pelicans, and I hope I'm saying all that right. especially his name. Everybody deserves to have their name said right. The U.S. Army began construction of a military fortress on the island in 1853. It was named Alcatraz. There are no records that I know of. I believe no records were kept as to how many deaths occurred while it was active as a military fortress. But there are catacombs beneath it and other, we just don't know how many people died there. But due to climbing crime rates during the gangster era, Alcatraz began a makeover into a prison suited for such hardened prisoners in 1934. Some of the best known inmates of this prison included Al Capone, Robert Stroud, known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, Machine Gun Kelly, and Doc Barker of the Ma Barker gang. Alcatraz finally closed its doors in 1963. The ghostly happenings at Alcatraz are numerous, recurring, and often. They happen a lot. People hear strange wailing sounds. They hear disembodied male voices actually speaking to people in different cells. They hear footsteps throughout the place. I mean, you can't, evidently, I've never been there, so I can't say from personal experience, but it's my understanding no matter where you go, you're going to hear footsteps. They just echo through the place. Unexplained odors, including that of smoke, which is kind of crazy. Apparitions. People see apparitions all the time. Unexplained sobbing sounds in specific cells. They see orbs all over the place. Cell 14D, which is down in the hole. It's like solitary confinement, basically. It is icy cold all the time. And I mean all the time. And that's not all. The number of deaths at Alcatraz number at least in the dozens. Now, again, we don't know what happened prior to it becoming a prison because no records were kept. However, after that, once it became a prison, they kept records because they had to because of the inmates. So here we go. 8 were killed by other inmates while it was a prison. 5 inmates committed suicide. 15 inmates died from natural causes. Cell blocks A, B, and C, as well as the laundry room, hospital, and the warden's house, are all said to be haunted. Ghosts of note include 2 guards who were killed in a shooting incident in 1946. Inmate Abby Butcher. Let me start that one over. Inmate Abby Butcher Moldowitz. His name was Abby, A-B-I-E, Abby Moldowitz. They called him Butcher. He was murdered in the laundry room, and apparently he's still there. Mob boss Al Capone is still said to play his banjo in various parts of the prison. That was his thing. He, instead of going out and having rec time in the yard or whatever, he preferred to play his banjo in the shower room. He liked the echo, I guess. I don't know. But they hear his banjo throughout the place, various places. In 1982, a radio personality spent, and I should have wrote down his name, damn it, sorry. A radio personality spent the night in Alcatraz with a psychic. He was a notorious skeptic. This radio personality was a notorious skeptic. At 3 a.m. in the utility corridor where 3 inmates died during the Battle of Alcatraz in 1946, bit of history. A group of inmates tried to escape Alcatraz. They had a plan. When the plan went tits up, there was a shootout right there in the prison. I think that's where these 2 guards were killed, but I don't know. It may be a different incident, but the inmates were holed up. They ended up getting forced back into this utility corridor, and that's where the shootout occurred. This radio personality in that utility corridor where these 3 inmates died, he claimed he got a tremendous feeling of great anger and felt an evil presence lying on the floor. He started cursing and said he felt a strong compulsion to fire a gun at people. Now, this guy was a notorious skeptic. The psychic that was with him They had, as I understand it, they had a video camera with them to try to capture some ghostly evidence in case they found some. This guy's eyes were wild. They looked. It was he was a different person at that point. We'll just put it that way. Any way you want to slice it, Alcatraz is one of the most haunted places in the world. They have tours there. At least they used to. I don't know if they still do or not, but that would be an interesting place to visit, in my opinion. As I understand it, there are so many ghosts there that people have lost count, and I can completely understand that because it had a storied history before it became a prison, and then they stuck some of the worst people in the worst dregs of society in there, and a lot of them died there. So, say what you will. That's a place. If there's a haunted place on the planet, Alcatraz would be it. The Hole. This is a little embarrassing, actually. I try to be as complete in my research as possible, and I try to include all the pertinent information with every video that I do. I am human, and I know it is hard to believe, but I do make mistakes from time to time. For example, I did a video on the Immortal Count a few weeks ago, and I just realized that I said Mary Shelley when I meant to say Bram Stoker. My bad. Kudos to all of you who caught it. Go and check that video out. Along the same lines, a few weeks ago, I did a video on Alcatraz prison, and it was a good video. There's a lot of paranormal activity there, and a bunch showed up in my research, and I thought the video was pretty good. I thought I'd gotten all of it. The problem was, evidently I missed a big one, and for that I apologize. Go check that video out as well. We're going to continue as like an addendum to that one. Here we go. Just a quick recap. Alcatraz served as a prison from 1933 to 1936. It was regarded by the prison system and the inmates alike as one of the most brutal prisons in the nation. Beatings and other punishments were pretty regular for virtually no reason. Just speaking out of turn got you beat. So, one of the most terrifying punishments that the prisoners had to endure was solitary confinement in the Hole. The Hole was an isolation nightmare with no amenities. You had a toilet, a sink, and a bed, and that was it. There was no light. You couldn't hear anything. You were alone in the cell, and that was it. It was literally a form of sensory deprivation. Prisoners were often sent to the Hole for days at a time. As I recall, there was one guy who got sent there for a lot longer than that. I think it was more than a year. It was bad. Prisoners understandably hated the cells in the Hole. One cell in particular was said to be inhabited by an inhuman and otherworldly entity, which the prisoners dubbed the Thing. It was the guards. I don't know if the guards believed it or not, but I would assume they used it as a form of punishment intentionally, forcing them to go into this place. So maybe the prisoners fearing that, I'm thinking maybe the guards took advantage of it. Well, in 1940, a prisoner was sent to the Hole for the night. His screams of anguish, fear, and agony echoed through the prison for hours. He cried out that something was in there with him, that particular something had red glowing eyes. The guards intentionally ignored him. One would imagine, I'm not trying to take the side of the guards here, but I would imagine if you put somebody in the Hole, they screamed a lot, so the guards kind of got used to ignoring it. So I'm not excusing it, but that's probably what happened. At any rate, so this went on all night. When the cell door was opened in the morning, this particular prisoner was found dead. His wide open, bloated eyes and facial expression denoted extreme fear. There were marks around his throat, but no other signs of violence. The coroner examined him and ruled that he'd been murdered by strangulation because he could not have made the marks himself. They could not be self-inflicted. Now here's another scary aspect of this. While his body was being examined, that particular prisoner was witnessed at morning roll call by more than a dozen people, including the guards. That particular prisoner subsequently vanished into thin air. And this is it's in the logbooks. It's there. This guy was counted at roll call while he was being examined by the coroner. I did a video a while back on the New Mexico State Prison because they had the big riot there. And the consensus there of all the different investigators were that there was some sort of demonic activity in that prison. I would imagine there's probably a demon in Alcatraz as well. The sheer brutality of the place, all the bad people that went there, more than likely would have attracted some sort of a demonic presence. It may very well still be there. Who knows? I can't believe I missed this. It was such a big part of this story, but I did. And I did this video to amend the first one. At any rate, if there's going to be a demonic entity at a prison, yeah, Alcatraz would be the prison to have that. So, inanimate objects. Since time immemorial, man has been plagued by what he perceives as evil spirits. Primitive man tried to understand and placate these spirits. Civilized man tends to ignore them and blame their activities on bad luck or coincidence. History is rife with stories of haunted buildings and houses, other structures. Television series abound with all manner of paranormal ghost hunting programs. We're all familiar with them and their format. Some are better than others, and some are outright ridiculous. I've done videos on paranormal programs that we like. Go and check that one out. Many times, what is overlooked, however, is when restless spirits and other entities inhabit specific inanimate objects for whatever reason. Some of the more famous ones include the demonic doll Annabelle, which resides in a closed-down museum. Ed and Lorraine Warren, famed demonologists, I'll get it right in a minute, created this museum, and they filled it with all manner of spiritually infested artifacts. I don't know why you would, but there you go. Dolls seem to be a very, very favorite thing for spirits to inhabit. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because they look like humans. I don't know. Gives them a semblance of their old life. I don't know. But this particular doll, Annabelle, is allegedly demon possessed. Now, it's from the Conjuring house. I can't remember I did a video on it. Anyway, I can't remember what it's called now. At any rate, these dolls are everywhere, and for whatever reason, spirits like them. I don't know, but Annabelle is by no means the only one that is reportedly infested with an evil spirit. They're all over the place. There's a bed, the Great Bed of Ware. It was built in the 15th century. People who slept in the bed evidently carved on it. It was built for a king, and he used it. And then, since then, people who have slept in the bed carved on it and desecrated it to the point that the ghost of the carpenter who built it tends to attack people who sleep in it. Yeah, I mean, he carved that specifically for a king. He obviously, put his love and patience and his skill into perfecting the bed because it was for a king. And other people come along and start desecrating it. Yeah, I'd be a little miffed too, wouldn't you? The Hope Diamond is allegedly cursed and brings misfortune to anyone who owns it. There is substantial evidence to support this allegation. A number of people have died. A number of people have had serious accidents that left them scarred or crippled. There's substantial evidence to support that allegation. The Terracotta Army, a stone artwork set to protect the first emperor of China forever, is said to bring misfortune to those who disturb them. And there's evidence to support that claim. It's one thing when you have bad luck. If you've read the accounts of the people who found that and were excavating it and like that, holy crap. The tombs of the pharaohs didn't have curses like that. It was ridiculous. The Dark Mirror, purchased at a psychic fair in the Columbus area, is said to bring upsetting and dark visions to those who gaze into its scrying reflection. Yeah, I've heard horror stories about that one. This is a little bit different here. There's a phone number, 0888-888-888 is evident that this phone number is evidently cursed. Everyone who owned that phone number have allegedly not, not survived. They met untimely ends through the weirdest means. You know, a car accident. As I read an account where one of the guys was in his bed and a car came through his house, drunk driver, and killed him. You know, the phone number has been put out of order. It's no longer issued. That's how bad it got. There's a box. It's a wine box called the Dybbuk, D-Y-B-B-U-K, the Dybbuk box. Evidently, the original owner was a Holocaust survivor. This box is allegedly a demon-possessed wine box that gives the owner horrific nightmares. Now, also, people who have touched the box have reported paranormal activity which follows them around in their lives. So they see the box, they touch it, and they go off and do their thing miles away across the country or whatever, and whatever was there follows them. More than one has allegedly been possessed by a demon to varying degrees. Some of them have met untimely ends. So, yeah, the Dybbuk box is not to be messed with. That's all I'm saying. Now, this is by no means all of them. The world is filled with all manner of items allegedly possessed by demonic forces or spirits. Some, I've heard some are good, but for the majority of the ones I've heard are quite nasty. I read an article years ago about an antique beer stein that poisoned anyone who used it, no matter how thoroughly it was cleaned. Finally, somebody just broke it and destroyed it, and that was it. My advice to you is to be very, very careful what you buy and from whom, especially antiques at auction or from estate sales. Honestly, you just never know.
The House of Death. In Greenwich Village, on the west side of Lower Manhattan, sits an unassuming brownstone. It's a beautiful building erected in 1856. During its illustrious life, it has housed many of the city's elites, including the wife of the founder of the Metropolitan Underground Railroad and the Broadway Underground Railroad, Mr. James Borman Johnston. He was influential in the city's literary and art world. After his death, his widow moved their daughters into the House of Death. Of course, I don't think she knew it was that at the time, or she probably wouldn't have. But they moved in there in the 1880s. The first recorded incident of bad luck was in 1897. A boy suffered a broken leg when he was hit by a man riding a bicycle. The cyclist was arrested for that. Samuel Clemens, also known as Mark Twain, stayed at the house for just over 12 months. As a skeptic, he wrote of a clear and plain paranormal experience. I can't read my own writing. He witnessed a piece of wood moving through the air by itself. Being Mark Twain, he of course shot it with his pistol. Yeah, what is it? I don't know. Kill it. Oh my God. That's Mark Twain, you know. The piece of wood fell to the floor amidst drops of blood. Mark Twain maintained that the blood was from a rat. How you get that, I don't know. But a skeptic will be a skeptic no matter what. The House of Death has more than a score of ghosts inhabiting it. That's more than 20. Mark Twain, apparently, is one of them. He's been seen multiple times. His ghost has actually interacted with people, talking to them, that kind of thing. Monstrous dark shadows have been seen moving through the halls. A brave woman tried to touch one and said it was a substance without substance.
It was chilly and damp like a marsh mist. People have seen a woman in a white dress in several places in the building. The people have seen a gray cat moving through the corridors, a phantom gray cat. And one of the most tragic ones, there's a young girl roaming the halls. 10 deaths occurred in the house, the first of which was a dog. The deaths were caused by heart attacks, suicides, and murder, and they all came in rapid succession. On November 2nd, 1987, this is the worst one, oh my God. I had to put this in there because it's heart-wrenching, so be aware. On November 2nd, 1987, Lisa Nussbaum was murdered in the house. She was 6 years old. Her father apparently beat the poor girl to death while on a cocaine binge. As a parent, that gets me. The ghostly happenings in the house spread to surrounding buildings. A ghostly female figure is often seen wandering in the corridors and nearby buildings as well. The stairwell apparently seems to be the nexus of the ghostly activity in this building, in the House of Death. The antique stairs are dark and wide and evidently are where the ghosts prefer to dwell. This is where the majority of the sightings are, and people have tried to go in and investigate, and all that ever comes out of it is, well, they're here, Nobody's ever tried to really, go after it, so I don't know. The house is currently privately owned and occupied, and the current occupants continue to report ghostly happenings. Evidently, none of these ghostly happenings are apparently dangerous. That's the part that gets me. The part that I would be worried about is the monstrous dark shadows that have been seen moving through the halls. That part gets me. Now, this woman that apparently touched it, it didn't harm her. She just said it was a substance without substance and kind of felt chilly and damp like a marsh mist. So I don't know what the hell that's about. That doesn't sound demonic to me, but I don't know. A dark shadow, I don't know. Cimarron, New Mexico. The town of Cimarron, New Mexico was front and center in the opening of the Old West. This is literally ground zero of the Wild West. The Santa Fe Trail runs right through here. Some of the biggest names in American history frequented the area. We got Clay Allison, who was a famous gunfighter. We got Buffalo Bill Cody, Jesse James, Annie Oakley, Wyatt and Morgan Earp stayed here for a night at the St. James Hotel. Blackjack Ketchum was here, many and many others. The Maxwell Land Grant and the Colfax County War took place in this area. The Colfax County War was a range war. There was a dispute over who owned what parts of land of the Maxwell Land Grant. The locals who had been living there for generations wanted, they owned the land, at least what they thought. And the people who owned the Maxwell Land Grant decided they wanted the whole thing. So there was a range war over that. There were murders in Cimarron, especially at the St. James Hotel, were commonplace. The St. James Hotel is known to be haunted by these restless spirits. And it just goes on and on and on. And that's not the only place in Cimarron, but there's tons of others. Lots of the local businesses, the local buildings have been around since then. And there's almost every place in in Cimarron that has an old building like that has stories. You just got to listen. Southwest of Cimarron stands Urraca Mesa, Urraca. It's long thought to be home to many paranormal phenomena, including, quote, a portal to hell. There used to be cat totems standing guard around this portal, but they have long since disappeared. Local American Indian tribes, First Americans, claim that it is haunted. Some believe that local mystics use the energy of the mesa to bolster their magic. Who knows? Others believe that the mesa may be one of the origin points for the skinwalkers. And if you don't know what a skinwalker is, you got to look that up. Those things are terrifying. It's just crazy. And if it's not just Uraka Mesa, there's tons of other places in the area that are landmarks, historic landmarks. There's lots of places in the area where massacres took place, and I'm not talking where Indians massacred white people. I'm talking about during the Colfax County War. There was lots of gunfire, lots of death and destruction. As I recall, the Colfax County War started when a preacher was killed, and a local preacher, and everybody was very angry about that. And as I recall, Clay Allison found they found the guy that did it, and Clay Allison paraded him up and down Main, got drunk, because Clay Allison was a good guy until he got drunk, and then he became this vicious, he was not a happy drunk. We'll just leave it at that. And he got this guy that they figured killed this preacher, and as I understand it, as I recall, they drug him up and down Main Street to show him off, and then they hung him in front of the St. James Hotel right there. That was Wild West justice right there, mob justice. And that's one of the things about the St. James. There's tons of places there where people hear all kind of ghostly stuff. The whole area is rife with hauntings. So you just got to listen to the locals and let them tell you stories. If you get the chance, the St. James Hotel in Cimarron, as well as the surrounding area, can be a rewarding vacation spot. If you like ghosts, this is a place to come visit. There are many tourist attractions, and most of them are said to be haunted in some way or other. This place has such a rich and storied past. It can't not be haunted. That's all I'm saying. Battlefields. I was trying to find a specific battlefield, but it turns out there's a whole buttload of them, and apparently they're all haunted. So I'm just going to go down a list here. It has been said, and I truly believe it, that every square inch of land in the world once belonged to someone else. The entire world has been drenched in blood, and it's quite probable that there are ghosts in every corner of the globe. But if you want to see ghosts, wandering the land, you really need to find the battlefields, places where men butchered each other en masse. I'm sure that every battlefield has ghosts, some more so than others. I'm going to list 5 of the bloodiest battlefields across the world, all of which have had reports of spirits wandering the land. Here we go. Gettysburg, 1863. The North and the South fought over this terrain, and 46,000 Americans paid the ultimate price. Gettysburg is one of the most haunted battlefields in America. They see all kinds of stuff there. You name it, it's been seen there. Apparitions, orbs, phantoms, you name it. Actual physical embodiment of soldiers. It's all there. You just got to look. Number 2, Cannae, 216 BC. Hannibal sought to defeat the Romans in one last decisive battle. Hannibal outwitted the Romans and won. This battlefield is in Italy. 50,000 Romans were killed compared to only 10,000 Carthaginians. And to this day, everybody who goes and visits that battlefield, I walked there one time in 87. I walked on that ground, and I could feel something. I didn't see anything, but I could feel something, if that makes any sense. You just got to go there. That's all there is to it. Number 3, the Somme in World War I. The Battle of the Somme was, oh my God, ridiculous. The Battle of the Somme was where they were trying to take the high ground from the Germans. The Germans had machine guns up on the ridges. Allied troops marched toward the machine guns. On day 1,
This was the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. The actual Battle of the Somme lasted for several months and cost over 1 million dead with no significant change in the lines. But that first day was truly horrific. 60,000 British and 8,000 Germans died. Can you imagine being ordered to march forward into a machine gun? If there's not ghosts on that battlefield, there's not ghosts anywhere. That's all I'm saying. Number 4, Leipzig, 1813. The French fought the combined forces of Austria, Prussia, and Russia. This was the most decisive defeat of Napoleon's career. The superior French forces were overwhelmed by the superior numbers of the other three, their opponents. 30,000 French died compared to 54,000 of the opposition. When you talk about a battle, people tend to think of newer battles because of the better weaponry being more bloody. And that's not the case, because you also have to take into account in modern battlefields they have cold weather gear. They have modern medical equipment, modern medicines like penicillin, antibiotics. When Leipzig happened, they didn't have antibiotics. They had nothing. So a gunshot became infected. A gunshot wound was more than likely going to be fatal regardless. Also, modern bullets make nice, neat holes. Musket balls, when they hit a bone, they tend to fragment. You've seen movies like from the Old West, for example, where the doctor's digging around there with forceps and I got it, ka-ting, you know. No, you're in there, Dale. A piece went this way and a piece went that way, and I think another piece went up this way. They're digging through the meat to get the bullet fragments. That's pretty much what happened, because the process for casting musket balls was not precise. You had air bubbles in them. It was just crazy. Aside from the battle itself, battlefield conditions and the aftermath of the battle killed a lot of people. And pain and suffering, it's not like they had painkillers. The most they had was like wine and spirits. But they didn't have morphine. They didn't have, any of the modern medicines. So the aftermath of the battle was just as bloody as the battle itself. The older battles like that, I can't imagine going through that. That's ridiculous. And the 5th one. This was quite possibly the bloodiest battlefield anywhere in the world. Stalingrad, 1942 and 43, World War II. Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. The battle was long and costly for both sides. 841,000 Germans died compared to 1,130,000 Russians. The totals would have been far less had Hitler allowed the 6th Army to retreat. But by February 1943, the 6th Army was crushed. This was by far the bloodiest battle in history. There are reports of cannibalism. There are reports of eating dogs, eating horses, eating each other. Like I said, cannibalism, eating each other. This was the hardest defeat for the German army during World War II. The German military was superior to the Russian military. But the Russian military had two things going for it. One, they were more acclimated to the winter. They had better gear. Two, they had superior numbers. Oh my God, numbers. When the army commander, the military commander, is begging to retreat because he knows he's going to get encircled and cut off, and Hitler refused to let them retreat. I did a military blunders video on this. Go check that out. You'll see what I mean. It was crazy. And these are not the only 5, by the way. There are other battlefields, to be sure, and I'm sure all of them were horrific and bloody. There's no such thing as a good battle or a friendly war. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. Spirits and ghosts have been seen at all of these grim places, and rightly so. I seriously doubt there is a way to die on a battlefield that doesn't cause shock and confusion. If there was a place in the world that would have ghosts haunting it, battlefields would be that place. Imagine going through eternity trying to win a battle that you lost a long time ago, or trying to escape a battle that you died at. Talk about purgatory.
On Tombstone, Arizona. Thanks to Western lore in Hollywood, no town in the American West holds more of a grip on the American imagination than Tombstone. This was the site of the famous gunfight at the OK Corral on October 26, 1881. There were 2 political factions. They vied for control of the town. On one side was the ranchers, represented by the Cowboys, the group called the Cowboys. These included the Clantons and the McLauries. On the other side was the mine and business owners, represented by the Earps and Doc Holliday. Both sides blamed the other for corruption and collusion. As I understand it, one side had the sheriff on their side and the other side had the marshal on their side, so even law enforcement was split between the two. The gunfight lasted for 30 seconds, but the lore and the stories will last forever. I'm not going to go into the details of the gunfight because the actual details of the gunfight are irrelevant for this video. Suffice it to say, the Earps won. Tombstone was founded in 1877 and was named for its proximity to the nearby Tombstone silver mine. By the mid-1880s, the population had grown to over 27,000. It is the epitome of the word boomtown. There were 100 saloons in a huge and booming red light district. That's prostitutes and gambling. Gunfights and deadly brawls were a common occurrence. Shootings and murders were also commonplace. Records of the deaths are incomplete, so nobody can say for sure exactly how many people were killed in Tombstone. After the OK Corral gunfight, Virgil Earp and Morgan Earp were both shot in the back and at different times. Virgil was disabled. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he lost an arm, but Morgan was killed. Wyatt and Doc Holliday went on a rampage, killing cowboys and looking for the back shooters. Some say they killed as many as 30 or more before they fled Arizona. There are many hotspots throughout Tombstone, chief of which is the Grand Hotel, now called Big Nose Kate's Saloon. It was named after Kate Elder, Doc Holliday's wife. Occurrences in the saloon are almost daily and include people being touched, shoved, grabbed, and choked. People also report drinks being levitated off of trays and being thrown in guests' faces. Disembodied voices and phantom gunshots are fairly common. Apparitions are not uncommon either, especially that of a man dressed in fairly fancy clothes, sitting at a gambling, what used to be a gambling table. Shot glasses and silverware are thrown across the room, sometimes at guests. So it can get a little dangerous, but then again, Tombstone has never ever been a safe town to live in. I'm just saying. It is also said that the ghost of a miner prowls the cellar in Big Nose Kate's, he apparently guarding the treasure that he hid there. A lot of people work the silver mines, and of course they spent their money there in these saloons and the hotels. So when this guy apparently amassed a good deal of silver. He hid it in the cellar of the Grand Hotel, which is of course now Big Nose Kate's saloon, and apparently his ghost is there still guarding what he hid. So other people report apparitions walking in the streets. As a matter of fact, both Virgil and Morgan Earp are said to prowl the streets looking for cowboys. Yeah. A lot of people think that feuds were, well, I'm feuding with so-and-so, so I ain't talking with them. Back in the day, feuding was, let's go get our guns and go kill those guys. That was a feud back in the day. And feuds ended when one side ran out of people. That's just the way it was. So, if the Earps are still feuding with the cowboys, yeah, they're going to be looking for the cowboys there in Tombstone. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, different mindset back then, folks. You don't give up, period.